Good morning, everybody. My name's Nigel Morton. I'm the chair of the session. Paul Carruthers from IBM is going to do the presentation. There is a chat box on Zoom, and if you can find that, and it may need a little bit of clicking about, then you can use that to ask questions. What we're planning to do is, if possible, leave questions until the end. So if you can put the questions in the chat box, then Paul will try to cover them at the end of the session. The session is going to take about, I guess, half an hour, Paul, with a live demo at the end. So that's the exciting part. Sorry for sounding slightly distracted, because I'm just letting people in who are joining slightly late. No problem with that. Okay. With that, I think, Paul, over to you if you'd like to start. Oh, sorry, there is one other thing. There seems to be a minor problem with the handouts at the moment. I think I know what the problem is. We'll try to get that sorted. I'm sure it'll be sorted later on today, if not during the presentation. So just to let you know, you should be able to get to the handouts from the agenda. That currently isn't working, but we will fix it. Okay, sorry for the long introduction, Paul. Over to you. Nope. Thank you very much.
No problem. And just to remind you, if you can't, you've got a copy of this in PowerPoint anyway. So one way or another, the people on the call should get to see things. Okay, so hello everybody. Just out of interest, how many, Nigel, how many people are currently on the call? Oh, 20, I can see.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right, my name's Paul Carruthers. I work for IBM. I'm in a European team where I cover kicks, which I've basically done since the 90s. Although I joined IBM in 98, I was working with kicks as a tech support for a decade before that. When in IBM, I had 5 years in IBM outsourcing, and then I moved into what is now called systems. In the beginning, it was software group. And two of the products I now look after, or solutions, I should say, is Cloud Tape Connector and DFSMShsm, Advanced Archive. I suppose really it should actually be the other way around. It's actually Advanced Archive for DFSMSm, but it doesn't matter. So, yeah, we've got the right title now. So what are we going for objectives here? I'm going to go through an overview. What is Cloud Tape Connector? What is Advanced Archive? How you configure it and use it for Cloud Tape Connector. How you configure and use it for Advanced Archive. We've then got a 1 minute 30-second YouTube promo, which is on there. And then I'm going to do a live demo using our Montpellier system. But I've got a plan B on this, that I recorded the 13-minute video last night. So if we have problems, then it can get distributed a different way. So because I'm on full screen at the moment, I actually can't see any questions coming in, but we'll deal with them after the presentation and demo, should there be any. So why have these products? So a little bit of history. Those of you who've been around a long time, and I'm certainly in that category, there has always been data backed up from disk. It's always been there. So whether it be a reel with the old read-write ring, whether it be a cartridge, whether it be a virtual tape, there's always been there. And what has happened is, so think about them, there was option 1 was tape, option 1 was cartridge, option 3 was VTS. They've just been there for a long time. But what happened is we had a thing called cloud object storage, which initially came with Amazon with their S3, but then IBM joined that game with CleverSafe, and they've rebranded it as cloud object storage. But in a way, think of it as the cloud, and this is a software version. So if you think the other three really are hardware, whether you're dealing with a reel, whether you're dealing with cartridge, whether you're dealing with VTS, it's still hardware. Okay. This, the fourth way, which is the way I like to think of it, is a software version. Okay, that you pick up, you have the idea, a starter task, you have your data, and instead of sending it to one of the other three, you can send it to the cloud, store it in the cloud, and then when you want it, bring it back. And you bring it back just the way you would with the other three. When you need it, it comes back. So the best way for this is think about this is it's not A is better than B, but not as good as C. It's not about that. There has always been the three hardware. This is simply a software version. So where it quite fits in is you actually have an advanced storage suite, but we're only really going to talk about the Cloud Tape Connector and the Advanced Archive. Okay, but there are others, but that's not for us. We're only going to talk about these. So, Cloud Tape Connector. Well, first of all, it's zip enabled. It is totally independent of hardware, as I mentioned before, and it supports cloud environments. So, you know, on premise or off premise. So, customer I'm working with, various customers, and what they've gone is they've actually gone, they already had a private cloud strategy. So it was a really easy option to give, saying if you'd already have a private cloud or you go into a private cloud, then why don't you simply move your mainframe data to it? Because you already have it anyway. But as I say, it is completely software defined. It's not like hardware gateways or anything like that. We've talked about it supports the S3, it supports Apache. You can encrypt the data before it leaves the mainframe. So when it goes to the cloud, it doesn't really matter whether the cloud does its own encryption or not, because you've already encrypted it on the mainframe. It then goes across, the cloud does whatever the cloud wants to do, gives it you back, and then you're going to decrypt it. So standard encryption. So there's this one here, which is currently at version 2.1. So the next product is Advanced Archive for HSM. Very similar idea, zip enabled, independent. You can follow SMS policies. That's like for level 2, move data as previously stored on level 2. So it's almost as, it's not to replace HSM. That's the first thing. But what you can do is, instead of having all your HSM data on tape, you can move HSM data into the cloud rather than tape. Okay, so it's not so much to replace. You could argue it's to support, and it would also reduce HSM workload, because instead of it going there, the product will be dealing with it. So that's the idea behind it. But some of the key things, take away, this is zip enabled, this is pure software, not a hardware solution like the other three options. Here's an example of how data might look when it's on your machine, but by the time it's stored in the cloud, it's already being converted to that. Okay, so that's quite an important point, that you're already using a crypto card and your data is totally safe. It's encrypted before it ever leaves the machine. So it doesn't really matter when it's in the cloud, because you've encrypted it anyway. So what I'm going to do here is, this is going to be like a slide presentation of both products. But don't worry too much about that because we've got the live demo and the YouTube as well. So what we're going to be using here is an example when you have for cloud tape connector. You have the exapting of whether things are backup or whether they're history. It's quite useful to distinguish because if something is classed as a history data set, what you can do is simply pool, and if a data set hasn't been used or accessed within, say, 24 hours or a week or a month or whatever number you want, really, it can automatically go to the cloud. Okay. And a backup data set, well, they are actually moved as soon as they are created. So that can be quite useful if you're backing up data. You create the file. Obviously, it's initially on disk, but as soon as whatever you wanted to create is created, it immediately goes to the cloud. Okay. So when you want to configure it, you simply I'm using a Bluemix on one and I'm using Amazon on another to show that these products, as long as it's cloud object storage, it really isn't bothered about the provider. Okay. So what you would do is you would go into the settings and your administrator would give you the various keys and the address and the appropriate bucket. So all you need to do is put it in, because once they are in, the cloud, the name, which in this case here, IBM COS, is all the product will then refer to. Okay, so when you're running any jobs or whatever, you are simply referring to IBM COS or Amazon or whatever the case may be. Okay. So here's an example of how you would define a history data set. So what that is saying, as soon as it's created, sorry, as soon as a certain amount of time's gone by, it will be backed up. And you can see there then how long you want to retain it for. You can actually have wildcards there. I'm using a full name, but you don't need to. But you're simply saying at a certain amount of time, should this data set, well, should you find this data set, send it to IBM COS and retain it. Similar idea with the backup. And what you're saying is, should I create anything called this, it will immediately go to COS, and it's the same type of information. So one is, do you want a poll? So just search for data and 24 hours without it being used, it goes to the cloud. Do you want it to go to cloud straight away? The option is for you. When you start the product, you get some quite useful information. It will tell you what you're already connected to. So in this example here, we're already connected to a cloud object storage for Amazon and a cloud object storage for IBM. It also tells you what any particular PTFs that have been applied, which is always quite a neat trick, really. If you ever have a problem and you're talking to labs, they'll always say, what PTFs have you got on? So that's always a nice trick. Okay. So here is an example of when I said about as soon as a file is created, we gave it that name there when we yelled at the user CTC demo runtime, whatever. So what that would do here is you would take 3 data sets, as we're doing there, just a standard dump and terse that's been around forever. But as soon as it's all been done, you want everything going to a particular data set, and that data set will immediately go to the cloud. So what you see here is a bit of a before and after picture. There's the data sets that as they are on a normal volume. But once you've invoked either history or backup rules, you can clearly see that the volume is now changed to the word cloud. Okay. And what it is there, that data, the data is now gone. It's now in the cloud. If you were to try and view it, you would simply not be allowed to. It would tell you something like tape not available or some message like that. But what you're doing is you're just getting a message that when the data comes back, this is where it goes. So it's just like a mark in the catalog. When you've dumped the data, the product keeps a log of where it's gone. So everything's in sync. So you can see those two data sets. And you can see where they've gone, and you can see what their names are in the cloud. And then if we look a little bit to the bottom, you can see, I mean, I'm actually, the cloud screenshot here, different environments might give you slightly different views depending on how your cloud's configured. This is the one I used, but you can clearly see that there is a link between the data that is in the cloud and the data that was the link. Okay. So what we're going to do here is, this is how you would then bring it back. You would simply pick one of the data sets, put an R against it, fill in information that you want to restore a data, you want it to go to disk and restore and delete any old backup, etc. And then you can see there that what you would then have is the demo sample, which was cloud, has now gone back to a proper volume. Once it's back, you could leave it in the cloud, so you can always then restore it again if you wanted to, or you can choose to delete it. Well, as we've brought it back and we're happy, we now want to delete it. It then confirms, do you want to delete it, which you're obviously going to say yes, and then you can see that that is now gone. So now the data is now only back on your LPAR and no longer in the cloud. What we're going to slightly do here is a slightly different way with those data sets. Instead of bringing it back via the panel, what we're going to do is, as you would expect, we're just going to, this is an example of a restore job. So we're going to require the file that we tersed. And I want to bring it back, restore it, and then delete the terse. Okay. The little screenshot that you're seeing in the corner is basically the after. That, as you can see, the demo SAMP dump is still there from a previous ring. But as you can see, you have now the runtime terse has gone, but it is basically has brought it back from the cloud, restored the appropriate data sets, and then deleted it. So again, similar for what you were doing with other archiving, you're still getting the same idea. How do you want to bring it back? Let's say, so the thing to think about this is you're simply using software on the cloud rather than hardware. When you have done this work, you get various information in a log. You can see here, where it will tell you what's been written to the cloud, what's been restored from the cloud, what's been deleted. Okay, and right at the bottom, you can see if we were a couple of slides had, I think there was 4 files in the cloud, and now you've just got the 2 control data sets in there. The 2 that we stored have now gone. Okay. When we now come to Advanced Archive for HSM, again, it's similar but different. And again, we're going to use the idea with archiving. So we go to settings, again, HSM done. And the same sort of idea. In this one, we're going to use Amazon, because as I say, all it expects is that you follow cloud object storage rules. The provider is irrelevant. So you would then define it. So now we're going to refer this to as Amazon. we're going to do a similar thing where we're going to be referring to these files. And then we're going to define definitions. And as you can see, there's an Amazon definition there. What will happen here is something similar. Now, one of the things you can do if you're on the line 24 there, where it says comma parm equals sim, that you can simulate a sending to the cloud to make sure you've collected the right information. You'll get all the reports, but obviously it doesn't really do it. And once you're happy, you can then just simply remove the parm equals sim, and then it will do it for real. But if you're looking for what we have here, you're saying send it to Amazon, use this, anything that meets these rules. Level 0, the system I have, I don't have any access to tape. I only have disk. So it's level 0 and the volume. And basically after it's run, you can then see that those data sets where have a volume of archive. So the other product or the other solution has a cloud, this has archive. But the situation's still the same. It's simply a line in the catalog. It's no longer, the data is no longer on your machine. Okay, it's simply a reference. When you've run that, you can have a look at the reporting, and it will tell you the data and how many and how big it's gone, how much data has been sent across. So you get them report. And then when we have a look here, and this obviously is Amazon's S3, but you can see that you have the 3 archive files, and then you also have some control information for the solution. But all we're bothered about is the 3 archive files. Okay. So when we want to bring it back here, what we're going to do here is simply, probably the simplest way I could think of was an IEFBR14 job where we're just simply going to reference the 3 data sets. And we know they've been archived, we know they're in the cloud, but when we've run the job, we get this output that tells you that it's been returned. And after it's been returned, the log will then show you the data that's come back. And when you then go to the cloud where we did have the 3 files plus the control information, there is now only the control information. Okay. So, well, we'll ignore that for a second. I don't know what's going on there. Oh, that's gone strange because there should be, what I'm going to do here is there should be the video link. So what I'm going to do here, and I don't know what's happened there, but what I'm going to do is show the I'm going to show the video link first of all. So if I do cloud tape connector YouTube, and then we should have there will be a very short video. Have I spelled that right? Cloud tape connector. And there will be a YouTube for it, and I know there is. Cloud tape connector YouTube, and I can't find that at the moment, but I definitely I don't know what's going on there because definitely there. Right, let's go straight to YouTube because that's that with the presentation. I go straight to YouTube, and that's not giving any response. So, and then as soon as I then put in YouTube, no, I'm not interested. And then as soon as I go to this cloud tape connector. This is the one. This is the 90-second video that I'd like you to see.
Paul, the technology's got a bit of a problem. There's no audio.
Sorry?
There's no audio, Paul. Which, come to think of it, there isn't going to be, is there?
What, audio from me?
No, you're okay, but clearly there's supposed to be audio on the YouTube video.
Right. Okay. Well, the best thing to do then is if people look on the presentation you should have, or on there, it will actually have the link. So for the audience, if you can make a note, if you go to YouTube and type Cloud Tape Connector, you get the 90-second video. Okay. So what we're going to do is we will now scrap that. And what we will now do is go straight into the, we will go straight into a demo. Okay, so we will go that way. So this is the live demo. And what we're now going to do is the live demo is going to be relating to Advanced Archive. And the reason for doing that is because obviously there's the YouTube video for Cloud Tape Connector. So that's why I did promote the video, promote YouTube, and then do the live demo on Advanced Archive. So when you actually first install it, these data sets, the SAXQs, are what you would get as your target libraries after the SMP install. And what we're seeing here, if we go to where I've marked here, the active, the archive, the cloud def, as well as the restore, they are created as part of your installation or customization. And these data sets here are what we're going to be using for the live demo. So don't worry about those too much at the moment. So when you part of the installation is where you're setting up your parameters, and that's where you're defining data sets, number of records. It's all they're all documented in the manuals, what you do and don't need. Okay, but when you come to the product, is a simple start a task, and when we start it, you have the various control information, but it's probably the bits at the bottom that really matter, just in case you ever need to get in touch with the labs. They might say, what's your level of this, or what's your level of that. I also mentioned about the parameters that you're setting up, and they are displayed as well when you come to start. So what we are going to do is, first of all, is we are going to back up all of these data sets. And then what we're going to do is then bring them back in different ways. So the object we're going to bring back with TSO option 1. The source we're going to bring back with an IFBR14. And the VSAM we're going to bring back with a normal archive job. Okay, so let's go to back it up. When we come to back it up, we have use this job. So we have a situation here where you can see the name IBM COS, and you've seen that from the demo, but I will show you that again. You can see the data sets, should you do that, and the volume and the terse, and again you can have the simulator, which we're not going to bother with. So we then run it. That might take a little bit of time. So what we'll briefly do is have a look at the panels. And this is the panel on here. So you can think, view what's been archived to data sets for tape. But it's the settings that's probably the more interesting, because you can set migration level 2 settings. You can set up different SMS rules. Oh, not job's finished, which is here. You can add your own, and obviously your definitions, which we have here. So for Amazon, we would just browse that, and away we go. Okay, so the data has now been archived, as we can see. If we were to go to the cloud, and when the cloud, we get that, you can see the 3 data sets, as well as the control information that we're not particularly bothered about, but it's the 3 data sets that matter. So what we're now going to do is bring this back. So we'll take the first one, and there's different ways of bringing data back. I'm just using these as examples. So we will go to here. I now want to view a data set. It's been brought back from the cloud, and it's now available to you. And there it is. Okay, so that's the first one. We will now take the second data set, the source. So we'll just simply use a standard IFBR 14 job to bring that one back, which is here. And then we'll just submit that one. And then that has now come back. And as you can see, 2 are now back. As I mentioned earlier, just through that, they are now back. So you can now view them. But if you try to do anything with this data set, you can see you get a tape not supported. That's because, of course, there's nothing really there anymore. But what we're now going to do is now bring this one back. So we're now going to use a supplied job to restore. And what we're going to do here is we're not going to bother simulation, and we don't need the first 2 because they're already back. Okay, and now what we're going to do is now submit this. Cancel that job. And we shall then wait. And that has come back. Okay. And now, as you can see, that is now back as well. If we were to go to my data sets that I've run, we can now see the first job. That's an archive report. And that was us sending those 3 sets of files to the cloud. Okay. The first one coming back, obviously there's not going to be a batch job for it because we use TSO option 1 for view. The second one, it was simply an IEBR, this one was an IEBR 14, and you're just simply getting a message. The data set was requested, the data set's been restored. And the third one is its own job, and you can see this is a data set that's come back. So there's just 3 ways of bringing it back. You can also bring data back through the panels as well, as I stated. So they're the 3 back. And if I was to now go back to the cloud, you can see that there's now only the control information left. So the data was on the machine, it was encrypted, it was sent to the cloud, stored in the cloud, and we brought it back 3 different ways, and there are other routes as well. So that's that done there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing the screen and see if there's any questions. So have we actually got any questions other than no volume? What have we got here? Oh, so let's take this from the top. Is CT a chargeable product? Yes, it is, but I don't. I'm not sure. As with anything with products, I have no. I'm on tech sales. That would be down to your procurement people talking to IBM sales to discuss a price. Okay. But again, I'm tech sales, and I'm just simply showing you the software solution. But yeah, it's not free, sadly. Okay, the no volume, no sound for me. Unfortunately, there's not much we could do about that. Okay, could you compare the use of CTC and advanced? Right, okay, that's a good question. A lot for that question there, it really does depend on what do you actually want. And I know it sounds a little bit of a cop-out answer, but do you actually want to maybe take some workload off HSM? So you want to be bringing in invoking HSM type rules and things like that. Take some data away from your tape and store it into the cloud. What type of data sets do you want to back up? Because HSM, the advanced archive, is a bit more flexible than Cloud Tape Connector. Or are you just simply bothered about the polling and what I really want is when I've made backups, I want my backups to go away. So I think the answer to that is and I know customers have done this in other countries, is when it comes to evaluation, is look at both. Because in many ways, they work in the same way. You still got to have a cloud environment to send data to. They're both software driven. There's no hardware involved. So my advice is, why not look at both? That would be my advantage. What do you want, and potentially look at both. So the next question, CTC looks very good, but surely it would require considerable amount of DASD. No, it doesn't. CTC itself, it actually doesn't. It really is. There's no actual WAS involved here. There's no Java or anything like that. It is traditional green screen panels. It actually doesn't. It's simply it's not that thirsty at all. It's the compression rate, transmission, the various performance I've seen has been very good. But again, for your own particular site, the obvious way around that is take it under evaluation. Evaluation doesn't cost you anything, and see if it works for you. Hopefully that's on that. Is there a ZVM equivalent? Not that I'm aware of. This is a ZOS only product. It will only run on ZOS. And is the file is pushed to, is it compressed? Yes, yes, the answer is. So as I say, you can compress and encrypt. And so you have the data. That's the nice thing about it. The data is how you want it to be compressed and encrypted before it ever even goes to the cloud. If the people who administer the cloud also have their own level of encryption and compression, that really is up to them. Because at the end of the day, what you want from a mainframe side is you've compressed it, you've encrypted it, it comes back how you wanted it, so you then decompress and unencrypt. So hopefully that answers the question. Is there any other questions? I mean, now the presentation's finished, would anybody like, do you think we can get away with coming off mute now the presentation's finished?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that we unmute everybody, and as soon as can work out how to do it.
I would encourage people to, I don't know what happened with it, certainly the presentation that you will get does.
Okay, what I've done is set it so that you can unmute yourself. So there should be a control somewhere on the, I think, bottom left of the Zoom screen that will allow you to do that. So if you want to ask a question, then unmute yourself and let's go ahead and see if that works.
Okay, so anybody want to be first up? Well, we have about 15 minutes to go.
I mean, there've been a lot of questions in the chat. I think you've answered all of them.
Well, if anybody from the chat would like to go a bit deeper into it, then we have 15 minutes left if anybody would like to discuss further. So that option is available.
Hi, Paul, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hear you fine.
That's Craig Herron from Media Ocean. I did ask a question in the chat and you kind of read it, but misunderstood my question really. So my question was around considerable amount of disk space required, and that wasn't for the install of CTC. That was for the amount of disk you'd need if you were using this this process to write your backups to disk, and then at some point back end of your batch window, then farming it out to the cloud solution, whether that's your private cloud or Amazon or wherever. So if you said, you know, I don't want to go, or potentially if I lose connection to my cloud provider or my cloud backup process, I've then got to store an entire night's backups on disk.
That's a good question.
Potentially about for us, you know, up to 15 terabytes in some cases, just to store one particular night's backups.
That's a good question. My understanding is that what it does is it pushes stuff to, if you like, almost like temporary volumes while it's sending it. So it sends it so the volumes may contain chunks, and therefore then it sends it, so it almost like writes it to a temporary disk, if that makes sense, and then it's the temporary disk that sends to there, so you don't lose performance in that way. But what it does is it checks is that connection available before it even starts. So if you lose a connection, it's going to fail anyway, and therefore then you wouldn't have. It doesn't do move everything and then send it. It's doing it piecemeal. Does that make sense?
Yes. So you know, that's the moving of the data off of disk once you've taken your backup. But
yes,
if you you know, because we all know the comms guys, no disrespect to comms guys, but you know, we can lose our comms connections at any point, and if we happen to lose connection to our cloud service, we can't offload from disk to cloud. So therefore, we don't want to stop production backups from running. So we want to continue writing those. We'd need a pool of disk. big enough to hold, enough data until that cloud connection was reconnected. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
Is the cost there for 15 terabytes of disk is a big chunk of disk.
That's true, and as I say, my understanding of it is that it moves blocks onto disks and sending them. So if it then all of a sudden, if you say we're doing them in say 1 terabyte blocks, then if you then fail to do the actual backup would therefore would then stop, so you wouldn't be using any more space, because in reality the job has failed, because if it can't connect, it doesn't wait to get everything. But what I can do for something like that, because it is a very good detailed question of what if, so what I can suggest you do, because it is a good question and nobody wants to carry a 15 terabytes they don't really want. So if you make an hopefully you've got my email address, but I can give it you now, which is carrutp@uk.ibm.com, but you should have that anyway.
Can you just stick that in the chat, Paul?
Yes, I will. That's a good idea, because what I'll do is I'll take that to the labs, because it's a very good question. My understanding is, because it breaks her into blocks, that scenario wouldn't happen, but it's a very good question. So are you all right with that then, Craig? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
If you send me, you can even put a bit more detail on when we're dealing with one-to-one email, and I will get it to the lab, because it is a very good question. I believe the way, as I say, the way stuff goes onto almost like temporary disk, almost like scratch disks, that it does chunks at a time. So if it stops, then you haven't lost everything. But it's a great question.
Okay. Yeah. I'll send you the detail in an email. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and by doing it that way, you'll be given a real detailed question, which I can go to the labs, and therefore you'll get a real detailed answer, because you'll be getting it from the developers themselves.
Brilliant.
Is that okay?
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Craig. Is anybody else? As I reckon we have maybe five minutes or so. Has anybody else got any questions?
So if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself. You all have the power to do that now.
I suppose just really to say, Paul, thanks very much for a clear presentation. It was very interesting, and it's many years since I've worked on mainframes actually in a site, and it just shows you how much it's sort of moved on, and especially with the cloud angle now. I'm pleased to hear it's compressed and also it's encrypted as well, because we don't want anybody getting any of our data. But I can see it's being very, very popular.
And one of the things that when I've been talking with various customers around Europe is the point of it's a software solution. And that's the nice thing about it. Nobody's going involved app servers, nobody's going around Java, nobody's worrying about what happens with level 10 work, with version 10 work, with version 11. It is, in some ways, it's almost like, if you like, almost like traditional mainframe. And it does that, and that actually helps. But it being software only, can I ask on there is, or possibly Andy or anybody else, are any of you guys you're going down the private cloud route anyway? Because the customers I'm dealing with, they've already decided to go. They've already got themselves a cloud environment, and therefore then using this product to store data was relatively easy for them, because they had a cloud strategy anyway. Would anybody like to, Andy or whatever, have any of your customers already going down a cloud strategy route? Just while we've got a few minutes.
I don't want to keep jumping in. It's Craig again.
Yeah, that's no problem.
I'll just give someone else a chance to speak. We are actually using Backend Cloud off of our 7700. And which is where my question came from, because we needed to cater for backups inside of our 7700 if the cloud connectivity, which is actually out to Amazon, is lost for any reason. So we needed to give, I think, 10 terabytes worth of space in there as a pool to be used for this slush, if you like. Backups coming in, if they can't get out, then we need to be able to hold them. And we also migrate data, not using HSM, but another product from disk to our 7700. So that's kind of our 7700 is our private cloud, if you like. But off the back of that, you've got an an Amazon cloud. So yeah, we do have multiple solutions. But this option, like you've just said, if we didn't need to have that 7700 there, all the financial savings you get from not having to buy £1 million worth of kit, and you just go straight out to, another cloud provider. Obviously, there's costs involved there, but it is it's very interesting.
Well, you're right, and that is one of the points that are obviously nothing in this life is free, but there is no way. That's why one of the points stressing earlier on is this is a software solution and there are no hardware dependencies. As long as you have access to a provider that follows cloud object storage rules, that's all you need. And so everything else is software on the mainframe, and everything else is as long as you have access to a cloud, there is nothing in between. So yes, you can just say, yeah, I could. That's why I mentioned earlier about the other three. You can still use VTS. Nobody's saying you can't. You can still use reel or cartridge. Nobody's saying you can't. But you now have a fourth option that's software only, and therefore you don't have to. So think of it as a fourth way. So thanks for that, Craig. And obviously I'll get you a detailed answer to that. I see 2 messages have come in, and I better move to the bottom of them. What's that? Will you still need a pool to hold the data per archive? That's a similar, I'm assuming, Terry, that's
sorry, that's a statement, Paul. You will still need a pool.
You'll still need a pool. Yeah, and that's what I meant before about you having a pool, but it's like a temporary one. So, but I don't know the detailed answer to what Craig said about what do you do if you're dealing with 15 terabytes, which is a great question. And then I can get an answer to that, because it is a damn good question. I must have never been asked anything. We need that data, because different customers I've dealt with they've never asked that before. So I'm quite interested in the answer myself, Terry, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, obviously the same principle applies. If the data's on disk pre-archive, it's the same as if it's on tape. It's just a pool of data.
Yes.
Until it's written to the archive, it's got to reside somewhere. So really, you already have the answer. It's the same as you've got in your TS7700, Craig. Yeah.
Yes, that's kind of what I'd gathered, really. But it was a case of, this being a software option. Does it work exactly the same? Are there other considerations we need to worry about? I guess not, but yeah, it'd be nice to get the lab's kind of take on what their thought process is around this.
Yeah, and there's different ones. I don't know. I mean, one of the, I can't name names or anything, but one of the ones we're looking at it is that their old VTS is getting ready for replacement, and they are starting to look as well. We could upgrade, or maybe the software route is the answer. It's a horses for courses. So the best way of thinking about this is it's not saying A is better than B. We're just simply giving you a fourth option. And some people will like it and some people won't. And if you think that you might like it, then the obvious, well, as with all software, is take it under trial and have a play. It doesn't cost anything to have a play. And if it then doesn't work for you, okay, it doesn't work for you, but take it and have a play would be my advice. Any other questions?
We've just got a couple of minutes left in the session. We have to hand the Zoom session back so that it can be set up for the next session in this virtual room. So last call for questions, if anybody's got a quick one.
The future is cloud, that's all I can say.
Yeah, as long as the mainframe's driving it, I don't care. It's when it goes the other way around.
Absolutely, and I think it always will be. So it's stable platform.
Yeah.
So hopefully the cloud will become stable in the future as well.
Well, that's it. So I can't argue with that. So
yeah,
I would hope
you can come again, Andy.
but I would hope encourage people who are on this to at least trake it for at least have a trial, at least do a look. There's no cost involved, and if it's not for you, then it's not for you. But at least have a look, okay?
Okay, so final things. I'm assuming nobody's got any questions left. A little bit of an advertisement. There is a storage session tomorrow about using a TS7700 as a cloud target. There's actually some stuff in there which isn't quite as obvious as you might think. So there's another perspective on it, and we do have some of the developers on giving that presentation, or at least I hope we do if we get up early enough. Final thing, thank you very much for attending. Sorry about the small glitches. This is all a bit of a novelty, and discovered a couple of things. Please leave feedback on the session. There was a link in the handouts which you can't get to, unfortunately, so I'll have to fix that. I will get the handouts fixed. When you are able to give feedback, or if you've worked out the URL, it's session 2AB, 2 Alpha Bravo. With that, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much, Paul, particularly for being mad enough to do a live demo, which is
well, is it brave or is it stupid?
it's all of the above. Okay, so thanks again, Paul.
Yeah. And just to remind for the people on the audience, what I did on the live video is available as an MP4 that you will have.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll close the session. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye. Goodbye all.